Hey, good day, everybody. It's Patrick Lovell coming at you on Monday, March 20th, 2023. Happy Monday to everyone at 1:20 p.m. my time. And, it was amazing. I went to bed last night after another grueling day of trying to penetrate the marketplace of ideas out there in between what was an absolute like nuclear bomb of people reacting to whether or not Trump's going to be indicted, arrested, all of the rest stemming from Alvin Bragg's, um, you know, uh, potential indictment based on the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, which is just tiny compared to tiny hands compared to what Trump is in the midst of. And, of course, all of the people on the far right and the MAGAs that have lost their minds who are supporters of Donald Trump. And I mean that kind of like a jockstrap, you know what I mean? Um, they're willing to and ready to go to civil war. I mean, it's so pathetic, but it's scary and funny at the same time. But it's ridiculous. It's like a Monty Python film. But it's like we saw during the insurrection. It was like, where was the fucking National Guard? Where was the FBI? Where were all of the defenses in the Capitol? I mean, I kind of felt like the same after 9/11. Wait a second. Don't we have the strongest military and intelligence operations on the planet? Oh, yeah, we do. But if they're not being used, why might that be? So, I last night, yesterday, for those of you who pay attention to me on Twitter, and I stopped some of the other social media because Facebook's a black hole, Instagram's not appropriate for this stuff. And I just find people like battling over, political ideas. So I spend most of my political capital in Twitter. But, last night my son and I, we took our dogs for a walk, and then I settled up and I, watched a fun movie on Netflix called RRR. I saw, these guys dance at the Academy Awards, and I wasn't quite sure what it was, but I liked it. But I ended up watching this movie, and I was like, holy shit, that was entertaining. And I hadn't had that much fun in a movie since Inglorious Bastards. And I thought to myself, Jesus, I need to write a movie and produce a movie like that and just insert Wall Street. Because, look, guys, for those of you just tuning into this, I'm a producer, which means I'm a capitalist. But capitalism through collaboration, not through fiefdom, not through deception, not through toxic freaking derivatives, for example, in the entirety of the system, which I do not call capitalism. I call it corporate fascism undergirded by a criminal syndicate that uses socialism to pay back the racketeers of the mafiocracy. That's what it is. That's what's going on. And everybody's like twiddling their thumbs. And like most people want to like point the finger at somebody else to blame about something. Or as I see all of the time, and I have empathy for these people, and I love a lot of these people, but I see it everywhere where victims that are caught up in the misery of the judiciary, writhe around and just struggling to try to be heard, to try to have somebody come to their rescue, that they're getting screwed or they were screwed, and somebody, but meanwhile, everybody's about their independent cases. And what I'm trying to explain to you and express to you is that if tens of millions of us do not come together and unite in a massive, what I'm trying to stimulate, a massive, populist movement, tidal wave, crusade to purge corruption. And it's exactly right. It's exactly right. That's the only way we are going to hit the frickin' pause on this and then overwhelm the ocean of lies that are overwhelming us. And everybody in the power structure, even though seemingly throwing rocks at each other, whether it's the right-wing Republicans or the left-wing Democrats, and they're not right or left-wing. That's a misnomer as well. Everybody's getting paid by somebody, and the people that are paying these guys are getting paid by the system. And the system is for billionaires to basically loot trillions illegally, and you don't understand how it goes to basically shore up the system to get more and more control. So we do not have separation of powers. We do not have integrity of the law. We don't have any common sense in this country. And it's absolutely infuriating. And so, look, I'll just settle up with this at the moment because I'm sure there's more to come, and I'll have much more to say as the days and weeks and months and years, move forward. But look, people, what I'm trying to tell you is a couple of things, right? So, first of all, the presidential election's coming up in 2024. Okay, that should be a long way away, but the way it works in politics is that fundraising campaigns and positioning and all of the other things that are going on, not to mention the full court press by all of the institutions of enforcement and law in the United States, are coming down on Trump instead of the freaking Machiavellian deceptive acts and practices racketeering enterprise of the global financial sector that has complete control. I was thinking about this in a tweet that I said earlier today. I think, honestly, and this is going to sound crazy, but it's not when you really understand everything that's going on. Donald Trump's a buffoon, okay? And he had Trump mortgages, and he was deeply involved with all manners, shape, or form of predatory lending. That's the only thing he's ever been nailed for with Trump University. They were doing the same thing that everybody else was. I don't have all the details of Trump mortgages, but I guarantee you he learned what everybody else was doing, which was basically making up documentation fraud to get borrowers approved so they could get them in the system when they got paid fees to move this thing through the whole process of stopgaps through this massive, nuclear bomb of derivative deception based on sawdust, lies, and it was just all fucking bullshit, which brought down the global economy that led the Federal Reserve to circling the wagons. And I am the only person on the planet that continues to bring this to you full stop, which is the story of everything, which impacts everything. The Federal Reserve, with Congress, told a lie to the world when they basically presented that the remedy for cleaning up the fucking blow up of 2008 was going to be the Troubled Assets Relief Program. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, they concocted this scenario based on the Federal Reserve Act 13.3, which is the lender of last resort, to provide $30 trillion of liquidity to the fucking bankrupted racketeering enterprises that blew up the world with absolutely zero prosecutions, when the whole thing was racketeering. And on our journey at you can see at the www.thecon.tv, we found the only, miraculously, from a tragedy of a woman who showed us the light through her tragedy when she shot herself, an African-American woman, 5 times in the chest, that opened up the door for our discovery to what was the Summit County White Collar Task Force in Summit County, Ohio, led by the direction of former Attorney General Mark Dan, that got the only RICO conviction of this crime in the entire country. It was a pretty big deal. It was a $90 million basically Ponzi scheme that they busted up based on RICO statutes, but it was the exact same play that was taking place on Wall Street, which we show you at www.thecon.tv, and I've got so much more. And I'm interacting right now with like the best, journalists on the planet, because they're finally, listening to me like I'm trying to get millions of you to understand, where they're like, oh my God, you're absolutely right. And I was in contact with one of the most famous people on the planet who got the information for me, who knows a lot. And then I gave him the details, and he was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. That makes sense of everything. Meanwhile, what we're looking at right now, as we've had these bank runs for the last week and the stuff that went into Credit Suisse yesterday, and I think I just found out that I haven't corroborated this yet, but I think the Federal Reserve plowed $2 trillion into the financial system today. And I'm sure markets are going up. In fact, I know they're going up as a result of this, because this is how it plays. They pump it up, they create these bubbles, and then they freaking pull the plug on it, and then they make the run. And that's where the denizens of the disaster, get to pick up everything on the cheap, because it's a smash and grab. And that's also looting at the same time. But what it's not is free markets, and what it's not is the integrity of law. And so where does that leave us? So I was listening to these brokers a few minutes ago that have their own podcast in between some other things that I was doing. And this one guy really got my attention because he was saying a lot of things that I do. And this guy's been a professional in the business for a long time. He's probably about my age, maybe a little bit younger, but he's like, oh my God, this is how it does it. They do it for consolidation. And it's just, they freaking, all of the markets are out of whack because of these infusions of capital that feed the crack that everybody becomes dependent upon. And then they centralize power through the smash and grab looting techniques. And it's just exactly what I'm telling you from his point of view. And, he's a little bit more libertarian for my liking. But at the same time, we're speaking the same exact language. And I'm looking out here and I'm trying, and he says, this was the point of me bringing it up. The interviewer asked him, well, what do we have to do? And the guy's like, we got to have a revolution. But everybody's addicted to the crack. And I don't know how we're going to freaking create a revolution, because nobody cares until it happens to them. And when it does care, and people have gotten their lives turned upside down and inside out, and justifiably so, they're begging everybody to listen to them and help them. But meanwhile, there's tens of millions of people that if they came out of their freaking silos and got on board with what I'm telling you, then we would have a tidal wave populist people's crusade to purge corruption. To reestablish and to redeem ourselves, but to reestablish the rule of law, to reestablish separation of powers, to reestablish the United States of America, which we're not at the moment. And I don't know why I'm shouting. I apologize. It's just, fuck, man. I mean, I don't know how I get through to the millions of you out there who have to get this message. I know I'm being shadow banned on Twitter. The thing about Facebook, I think the same thing. You know, I would tell these stories forever and ever on Facebook, but typically, like all of my friends on Facebook, I mean, nobody wants to deal with reality. Everybody wants to show, and I was the same way for a long time, you know, how beautiful your family is and your pets and like all the cool places you went to and the new car that you bought and the great house and all of the freaking showy stuff that makes it look like, hey, look how great my life is. And then meanwhile, you find out later that so-and-so freaking had a divorce, or maybe someone committed suicide, or somebody train wrecked into bankruptcy, and you're like, oh boy, I didn't see that one coming. You know, but at the meantime, we're all really good at being able to hide what's happening behind ourselves. And I'm really happy for those of you who are doing great. But if you're doing great, you're probably a part of the system that I'm trying to reveal to everybody else. Look, if you, me, and everyone you see, and this is extremely important considering another front page article I saw in the New York Times this morning, another UN intergovernmental agency revelation about the impending doom of what's happening with climate change, that there's no time left. I mean, that we've already passed the threshold. We're doomed. You know, meanwhile, the West, everybody's like, oh my God, look how much it snowed. Oh my God, look how much it's raining in California and everything else. That's because of the polar vortex and the climate rivers and all of the rest of it that comes from the high pressure fluctuations based on the freaking poles increasing in warmth, which goes catastrophic throughout climate, hence climate change. But, you know, eventually we're doomed. But the bottom line is, look, man, all of these problems could have been fixed, quite frankly, especially the energy crisis one, back immediately after 9/11. Because it was like, oh my God, look what's going on. Saudi Arabia, energy in Middle East, and all of these things that led to war. Do you not know what that one was? That was to perpetuate the system. Look, it's the bad guys that have complete control that are really the financialized infrastructure of the United States alongside the fossil fuel / military industrial complex that has control of the legal complex, and they've all sold us out. The professional class has betrayed us. They were complicit in this system. And the financial system completely devastated everybody through a racketeering enterprise. And again, Federal Reserve Act 13.3 was used illegally. How do I know that? Well, I'll just tell you right now, you can read pages and pages of statutes of what the lender of last resort facility is supposed to do. You can go back and you can look at the history of what took place after, well, to create it after the Great Depression, and then also into the Black Tuesday or Thursday event, you know, when there was a huge run based on a technical glitch run back in 1987. And then I think 1991, there's a lot of history along this one. But somebody somewhere, somehow in the system knew exactly what they were doing, and they pumped everything up. Pumped and dumped, really is what it's called, and then they pulled the trigger on the world and created the shorts, which is what Goldman did. And then ultimately we end up with the giant vampire squid, which I saw last week, of course, on Aaron Burnett talking about Lloyd Blankfein about bank runs when he created the biggest bank run in history. We're getting played for the fool. They're pissing on your head, telling you it's rain. Most of you have no idea how the system works. Most of you don't even know what the history of the United States is. Most of you do not understand how the United States was born, what wars we fought, all of the struggles that we've had to endure and overcome to be able to give you an opportunity to be a citizen, to make your own informed decisions and get on board with somebody like me. Because otherwise, what you're looking at is a fascist state. But that's all it is at the moment. It's a corporate fascist state undergirded by a criminal system, a criminal syndicate, that uses socialism to backstop the mafiocracy. How on earth can you sit on your hands and blame everybody else and be, super, and I can understand being a little bit, fulfilled or happy to have the notion of Donald Trump going down, but I swear to God, oh, and that brings me full circle to the point that I wanted to make earlier. Look, I am convinced Donald Trump and his posse, they were involved with everything that I'm talking about that blew up the world in 2008-9, okay? In fact, Donald Trump was up to his eyeballs in it because he was also money laundering for Deutsche Bank through, I should say, for Russia vis-a-vis Deutsche Bank into his real estate properties. He and like most of Manhattan, not just Russia, but all of the different countries around the world. That's what happens with these billion-dollar skyscrapers and people parking their capital in New York real estate. It's a safe bet, okay? And everybody's in on it. But what is the point that I'm trying to make that I got to keep coming back to? So Donald Trump, oh yeah, this is my theory. I think somebody in Donald Trump's camp, be it Steve Bannon and everybody else, I think they watched the con. I think they watched the con and they were like, oh my God, this guy Patrick Lovell's telling the truth. Oh my God, here's an idea. Just like the banks, or I should say the pretender lenders, created tens of millions of liars loans based on, basically whiting out income and W-2s and everything else to get loans approved so that people could, get into this thing that they blew up the world with. Maybe Donald Trump was like, hey, wait, you know what? Why don't we do that to steal the election? Okay, that's first and foremost. And then he, brands it as the big lie, right? The whole system lied through fraud, right? Fraud to take down Donald Trump, Don the Con, the ultimate fraudster. He's projecting. This is what Donald Trump does. Lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. Okay, that's a formula. I learned that back in my college days from my fraternity brothers. And sorry, maybe that's a little part of white privilege that I'm revealing to you, but I never did that. I knew who they were and I knew what they were all about, and I didn't do it because I was like, fuck you guys, you clowns. Anyway, but that's how it works. But here's the irony of this whole thing. Because Don the Kind is a mid-level player. Now, what he's done effectively is he's been able to galvanize and, inspire, I guess, all the white supremacist movements that have been out there for decades. Okay? And don't forget that Fred Trump, his father, was full-on KKK and, making America great again, coming from Steve Bannon. That's what the KKK said. In fact, I'm not kidding. Hitler was so inspired by the KKK in making America great again. That's why they came up with the Nuremberg laws. I shit you not. Because all of the stuff preceded Hitler's rise to power. It was back during the Civil War and after the Civil War and Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff. Okay? But meanwhile, Donald Trump, being the villain that he is, the Joker out of Gotham that he is, everything he's guilty of up to his eyeballs in, I think borrowed from us to project this, to create everything insurrection, right? Because they were using documentation fabrication with the freaking elector certifications from Giuliani, Mr. freaking Rico guy. And now, as it turns out, Trump might be becoming indicted, I think, down in Georgia for Rico. Okay? And yeah, that would make a lot of sense. But guess what? What would also make a lot of sense? And this is my theory. I think all of Wall Street and all the major players from BlackRock who've been blocking us, and Larry Fink and all the top guys and all the dudes who are really in control of this world, right? I think they know exactly what we said to the con, and they want to head me off at the pass. And they're like, hey, look, let's turn let's switch the blame and implicate Trump on Rico. And everybody will be like, oh my God, problem solved. No, meanwhile, we had tens of millions of people literally set up, destroyed, gutted in the courts. The courts ignored the law, allowed unbelievable documentation fabrication to illegally foreclose on millions of people. And, they did it because the Federal Reserve provided quantitative easing to purchase the toxic assets from the American people, which were foam on the runway for the crashing financial system, and nothing has changed. So meanwhile, all of you out there pointing the blame, misdirection, this and that, please listen to what I'm telling you. The media is either a combination of completely stupid or they're in on it and they're lying to you. They're all lying to you. Even the most credible institutions of journalism in this country have not told you this story that I'm telling you. And in our story, we take the whole thing from, really like a street crime. From the death, the murder of the embodiment of the American dream vis-a-vis the Great Migration to an African-American couple who got their piece of the American dream only to have it ripped from them so that she had to shoot herself instead of go homeless, which epitomizes the entire American story, which led us to reveal the only RICO conviction in the entire country, which led us to understand the entirety of the system, how it all worked through control fraud, through Gresham's dynamic, through modern executive compensation, and through deceptive acts and practices, of which there were tens of millions of felonies that never got indicted. And the CEOs were all guilty of racketeering. And they just have more power than they ever had before. And I'm sure there's so much more that I want to say, but I'll finish with this. Please put this on your doorpost and mark it as a guide, as you're hearing this from on high, from the light of truth, from the sword of justice that has always had to fight evil from the very beginning of mankind. If you and me and everyone you see who isn't a Nazi, who believes in dignity, integrity, liberty, and sustainability, have to come together, and you don't pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Millions of us come together, join arms, forge forward with this populist tidal wave, crusade to purge corruption. And I'm asking you to donate $13 because I'm the producer. That's what I do. I will use everybody's contribution to build the platform, to build the genesis, to build the wave. And I'm not a big fan of the SEC football or the Alabama Crimson Tide, but like the freaking offensive line of the Crimson Tide for the last decade or so, which is the best in the country, except when Georgia beat them this last year, because they had the best offensive line in the country at that point. The point is they work together as a machine. They pound the rock forward. We together can pound the rock of truth forward to the point that we overwhelm the ocean of madness and lies of deception with the light of truth. And I've got a plan how to do that. Look, man, we got to get on first base. We've had like 50 or 60 contributors so far. We need to get to 1,300. So let's do the math. Let's do 1,250 contributors. Spread the word. Contribute $13. Tell 13 other people. Before you know it, we'll have the very first base to get us organized to get to the next level. The next level is going to be organizing a podcast with a real editor and all the right guests that I have access to, so you don't have to listen to me all the time, and you can listen to people much smarter than I am that I have access to that lays all this stuff out as the goddamn country's falling apart around you. Then once we get to the next level and the next level and next level, then we'll create a barnstorming revival tour of the American dream to freaking destroy the corruption that is trying to destroy us. My name is Patrick Lovell, and I approve this message because I am a patriot. Onwards and upwards.